Coming up on More Than Before.
Minimalism is not necessarily about not having much. It's not about that. It's more so letting go of things that really don't serve you, letting go of things that don't really bring you joy.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today my guest is the owner of Uncaged Solutions, a leadership development and team building company. She's a retired Air Force officer with over 20 years of service to our country. She holds a doctorate in strategic leadership, and she's an entrepreneur, servant leader, and most importantly, she is my good friend, Dr. Cynthia Coy. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Hey, so excited to be here, Nathan. Really.
Yeah, I'm so excited that I was able to convince you to come on here. Man, it has been a while since I've gotten the opportunity to talk with you. So I would love for you to share with everyone what's going on right now. What are you excited about in your life? And what's coming around the corner for you?
Yeah, so a lot has been going on since we last had a deep conversation. But what I'm really excited about it is really just continuing to build Uncaged Solutions. So I learned a lot in my first couple of years of entrepreneurship when I started full time back in late 2017. The things not to do, the things, you need to have in place before you really can go big. But now I'm just kind of at a point of resetting, and I've been adding a lot of good systems to my company and saving myself a lot of time. So one of the things I'm really excited about is the upcoming Live to Lead that I'm hosting this October and November. October being in Suffolk, Virginia, where I reside, and then that's on October 11th, and then November 15th, it will be in Springfield, Virginia. So excited for those two opportunities to do more leadership development for the masses. Yeah.
I love that. It's so good. And we need more people to talk about leadership. We need more leaders in the world, right? I think it's so funny because you and I, we've been around a lot of leaders over the last number of years. And when we go to conferences about leadership, we look around and we're like, oh, there's not a deficit of leadership. And then you come back home and you look around and you go, I think that we need some more leaders.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a huge need in the world. Cynthia, I'm curious, where did you grow up? From what I understand, you were kind of a nomad as a child.
Yes. I always say I'm from everywhere, right? So my dad was in the Air Force. So I was born in Panama City, Florida, at Tyndall Air Force Base, but yeah, can't call that home because I left when I was 7 months old. Went to Germany, went to the States, left. I spent a lot of time in Athens, Greece. That's where I say that was my formative years. But yeah, moved around a lot. And then I myself ended up going into the Air Force after college. And there you go, moved around a lot. So home for me is always, used to be San Antonio where my parents lived for a long time. But I always say home for me is now wherever I am. So.
And you had a pretty big family too, right? Yeah, I mean, you were the baby girl of the family, so I don't know if you knew there were other siblings in there, but
yeah. So I have two older sisters, an older brother, and then my younger brother. And so for me, growing up in between two brothers is definitely different. But for me, it was normal, right? So I did all the boy things, right? So played, football and basketball. I was very athletic, climbing trees and dresses, you name it. That's what I did. We were very adventurous. I think that's where my sense of adventure probably comes from, my childhood there, doing those kind of things.
I like how you say that you were really athletic. Right before we started recording, she's like, yeah, I'm kind of moving slow and tired. I just ran a 10K yesterday. And as if it's for all of you that listen to the show.
10 miler.
For all of you listening, that I don't run. And so for someone to say that they run a 10 mile, not a 10K, a 10 miler, let's get that straight. A 10 miler.
4 extra miles. Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty intense. That's pretty crazy to me. So like, who were you as a child? Like, were you kind of a bubbly person? Because I see you today and I feel like you're kind of a bubbly personality. You bring a great energy to the room. Who were you as a young girl?
So I always like to talk a lot, according to my family. I was always social. I remember I used to get in trouble for inviting people at church to dinner at my house because I would tell people, "Oh, my mom made, the menu for the Sunday afternoon." And it was funny because actually the chaplain at the base we were stationed at in Greece, he actually showed up. Him and his family showed up. I think most people at the time were like, a little kid, don't mind what she's saying. But yeah, they actually took me up on it. And that was a lesson learned. Yeah. There were consequences.
There were consequences. I could just imagine your father, like he's sitting down to dinner and all of a sudden the doorbell goes off, walks over and opens it, and there's the chaplain and his family like, "Oh, yeah, we're coming over for dinner. We were told by Cynthia that we should." Oh,
yeah,
that is so
I think
funny.
I've always had my personality has always been about bringing people together. Like, and it's very interesting because I'm actually an introvert. So I like being by myself. But I also just like to fellowship with people for a certain time, not all day. Because it really
There's
is
a
draining
certain
for
amount
me.
of time that you're allowed to visit with people, and then you have to
Yes.
leave.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that.
I think it's good for the soul. You need it, right? Because the laughter, yes, I can laugh at myself and I can laugh by myself watching something, but when you're with other people, it's just like you and I, we've been laughing, since we started. So
nonstop. I'm
since
sorry
I've
for all
met
of you here.
We have always had a very laughter-filled exchange.
Yeah, it's true. And that's one of the things that I've always loved, like interacting with you. It's joyful. There's a lightheartedness about it. And that doesn't mean that we don't talk about, deep things, but there's a lightheartedness that comes around when you're there, which is, I think that's really fascinating and really awesome. So as a young girl, I would imagine growing up in a military environment, that was kind of intense. What was that like with your dad? Like, what were some of the early lessons that you remember from your dad teaching you?
Always make your bed. That was always make your bed.
Before it was in any book,
was...
always make your bed.
I don't even know how old I was when I knew how to make my bed by myself, but all my life, that's all I always knew. It's like, always make your bed. So before I went to school, you had to have your bed made. Again, there were consequences if you did not. But but yeah, that to me was a big lesson. I think I realized more of what the lesson was as I got older, especially as I started to, get into minimalism a little more, and also just it makes your house clean, makes your room clean, right? And it's like that one thing that you do that probably takes 90 seconds to 2 minutes to, make a big impact in how your room looks. So, that was one of the biggest lessons that he taught me as a kid, or, I had to go through that experience being in a military family. And then as I got older, actually, my dad and I would have these conversations just about his life lessons. And so I remember one of the things he taught me was to not worry about things you can't control. And coming from a person, like I'm a high C on the DISC scale, right? So
kind of a controller.
kind of controller, yeah. That was really hard, but actually it's amazing once you like really understand that and start doing it, it makes life so less anxious. Because it's like, hey, that's one of the questions I have to ask myself. Can I control it? Can I not? And if I can't control it, let it go.
Yeah.
Somebody else's issue. Somebody else has to deal with it. Or, nature will take its course, whatever. But if it's something I can control, then, not just worry about it, but I also, for me, look at what can I do about it. And it kind of reminds me of, so I actually launched this mini course back in May, called Overwhelmed to Overflow. And that's one of the things I talk about in that course is when you look at obstacles, can you turn them into opportunities from a different perspective, right? Just looking at it differently. Or if it's something you can't control, then you let it go and you just find another way. So
I think that's so powerful because the world that we live in right now, we're always trying to control everything. And the fact that your father was able to teach you that at such a young age to not feel the need to control everything, but to focus only on the things that you can control. I am curious. I think a lot of people have gone through that phase of trying to figure out, what can you control? But I'm curious, what are some of the major things in your daily life now that you say, well, I can't control this, but I can control this? What are some of those major controlling pieces that you can actually control in your life?
So for me, my number one thing is my relationship with God. So as a woman of faith, that's my number one thing. I can cultivate my relationship with God every day. I can take time, set aside time to spend, reading, praying, meditating. I can do that. The second thing that I definitely have control over is my health, right? So actually, it's always interesting because I'm really big into health, reading about it, especially the neuroscience about it. But like for years, some people would say, "Oh, well, it's the genetics. If your dad had diabetes, as my dad did, like you're just gonna have it." That's not true. There's a lot of things you can control to prevent it, but a lot of it comes down to mindset too. So if your mindset is just like, "Oh, well, life is going to happen," instead of you living your life and making decisions in your life to change the outcomes, right? So if you do that, then life doesn't just happen. Life can be whatever you make it to be.
I love that so much. There are so many people that want to change everything instantly, and we forget that minor changes can create massive effects down the line. And so I'm curious, as you were growing up or even into your later years, what have been some of the small changes that you look back and you're like, well, that probably wasn't going to be as big as what the result has been because you've implemented them? What are some of those minor changes that you've put in your life that have helped you to get to where you are today?
I would say my minimalistic journey has been one of the probably most impactful things I've done. One, because again, it deals with mindset. A lot of the things that we in today's society, we're focused on things, and we do a lot of comparison, right? So your neighbor has it, or you see it in social media. Like when you scroll through Instagram, it's always funny to me how people record themselves getting up out of bed in the morning. And it's like, there's no camera in your room.
And
right?
they act surprised. They're like, oh.
Right. It's like I get up and I shower and all that stuff. I get it. But the point is, it's like you are influenced. People are influenced by that. And they're like, oh, they look at what's happening there, and then they're looking at their lives and they're like, oh, well, maybe I would have a bigger house or a more luxurious life to live if I did X, Y, Z. And the thing is, you never know who these people are behind the camera, what they're really living like. You only see what they want you to see. And so for me in my journey, like just letting go of who was there to compare myself with, except who I was yesterday. And tomorrow I'll compare who I am tomorrow with who I am today. Right. So that's letting me be my only person I compare myself against. Right. The versions of me, I should say. The versions of me are the ones I compare against. But the other thing too is when I think about what brings me joy, it's not all the things that I see on social media. It's like, yeah, I like traveling. I like experiences and whatnot. But I also have found what makes me thrive is not having a lot of clutter. So there go my my beginning of my minimalistic journey. Minimalism is not necessarily about not having much, right? It's not really about that. It's more so letting go of things that really don't serve you, letting go of things that don't really bring you joy. And when you look around your home, and you look around all the possessions that you have, are you even really using them? There was a PBS program I watched several years ago, Julie Morgenstern. She was an organization expert. And so she enlightened me on the rule that you only actually wear 20% of your clothes 80% of the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, she is so right. So right. And so I was like, I used to have 2 walk-in closets full of clothes because that's something I watched my mom have, right? And so I was like, but why do I have all these clothes? Especially at the time, I think I was still in the military and I had all these church clothes. And so I'm like, I go to church 52 weeks out of the year, maybe, right? And then do I need 52 different outfits to go to church? It's like,
let's be
no.
real. You had about 80 in there. So
Yeah. So I remember I downsized my 2 walk-in closets down to 1. And then over the years, I've just continued. And one of the rules that I use is, me and my sister actually kind of made that up, but for every one thing that you purchase, you have to give away 1 to 2 like items. And so what that does is, again, back to your mindset, it's like, okay, do I really, really want what I'm seeing in the store or online right now? Do I really have to have it? Or can I be content with what I have?
There's so much power to what you just said about being content with the things you have. And not that minimalism is necessarily the focus on less, it's the focus on more life of what are the things that actually give and bring you life. I'm reminded of the book of James in the Bible, and how he talks about how we are a slave to the things in our life that we focus on, that we meditate on, and how many things in our life distract us from that relationship, right? Because you were talking about your relationship with God, and it's so funny how stuff can just become an idol to us, and how important it is for us to let those things go. And so I'm actually curious, because I want to ask you this: how have you grown in your relationship with God since you have started to declutter things out of your life? Do you feel like it's been a massive improvement, or do you feel, maybe there's something else that has caused a greater relationship?
So a couple of things. One, I was married, so I went through a separation and divorce. That was a big thing too, because as you know, like even the Bible talks about like when you're married, which I think marriage is a wonderful thing, by the way. My parents were married 52 years, but it can be a beautiful thing, really can. But as the Bible talks about, like when you're married, you're serving your spouse. Your focus is on your spouse and your family, and God made it that way, and that's fine. But when you are single, like Paul in the Bible, right? And I like to call myself a little Pauletta or Paulina, whatever I call it. But yeah, when you don't have the obligation to, I don't know, not to bring us back in time and say, oh, I have to have dinner on the table at a certain time or something. But, I'm not taking care of anybody. I'm taking care of Cynthia. That's all I'm doing. And so for me, I have much more time to spend with God. But I also look at my mom, again, who was married for 52 years to my dad. And for her time, her faith is just as strong as I've ever seen it. But she practices John's law of consistency, chapter 5 of the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, right? One of my favorites. I remember even like when my dad passed, he passed in 2018. She has never missed a day of prayer and never missed a day of reading her Bible. And I remember like just looking at her in awe, like God would understand today if, the day after your husband just died, like he would understand. But it's such a, I don't want to say habit, but it's become so much an ingrained part of her life that is just, it's like getting up and making the bed for me, right? It's like just something that you do, you need to do for your day to really begin on a good note. So for me, I've incorporated that practice in my life. And so it's best for me to do it first thing when I get up, because it's no more distractions. It's like, the phone starts ringing or messages start coming in by 8, 9 o'clock, but at like 5:30 in the morning, there's no distractions. And so I get to cultivate more of that relationship for me. And then also I would say with the minimalistic thinking, I was finding that when I had clutter in my house, it also basically transitioned to my mind, because my brain would never shut off. And so when I started to get rid of things and the clutter started disappearing, my brain was a lot more clear. I thought a lot more clearly. And so, again, I'm not just coming to my, time with God, talking about all the things I need to get done, or, it's just more of, I actually look forward to just the fact that I get to spend this time. And it's not the only time I talk to God too, right? But I have conversations with God all day long throughout the day when I'm driving, walking, whatever. But that quiet time is, it's a great way to it sets my day, sets the tone for my day.
It really goes back to what your mom used to say to you all the time growing up. You're going to need God one day, so you better start a relationship with him now and pray.
Yeah.
Like
She used to say that all the time. She was like, you're going to need God someday. And, I always have known, yes, God is always going to be a part of my life. But I think for me, while I gave my life to Christ when I was 12, I would say I really didn't develop intimacy with him until more recently. Right? It's a one thing to know Nathan. I know about Nathan, right? I've heard all these wonderful, magnificent things about you, but until you and I started a relationship, I really don't know you, right? And even now, right? Like you have, people in your circles, right? Your outer circles, your inner and your innermost circles. And each time people enter a different circle that gets closer and closer to you, they know you more and more intimately. Obviously, your wife probably knows you the most, the best.
Oh, yeah.
Debatable now. But she's spending all the time with you, right? So it kind of happens, right?
It's true. That is such a key piece in relationship with other people, but also relationship with God. I'm curious, what was that maybe activity, or what did you start doing, or how did that transition to having that intimacy with God? What did that look like for you? Like, what was the shift for you to get you to that place?
Wow. I remember coming home to my apartment after I separated. And I remember it was just, for the first time in years, it was just quiet. It's just me. And I just remember sitting down and just talking out loud in the room to God and just asking questions. And more so, not just asking questions, but just kind of giving him my heart, the desires of my heart. So this is now what's happened, as far as the loss of the marriage. Now, take what is a pain or what has been a loss and turn it into something better than I could ever imagine. I never put limits on God, right? So I never try to tell him what to turn it into or what to do for me. But just, I always use a phrase. I always say, God, blow my mind. Just blow my mind. And that is something that has happened. So I started doing more walking outside. For me, I feel most connected when I'm in nature. It's something about looking at the trees or looking at the squirrels or different animals, birds that God creates. And one of the assurances that I always get from doing that is that you never have to worry, because just like I take care of all these animals, I take care of you. So that's a reassurance, right? So, and it's just nice. It's just amazing too, just to see how nature operates,
Yeah.
They
I
seem
love
to
that.
have it together better than people do.
Yeah, most times, except when when they're killing each other, eating your son. Oh wait,
Yeah.
we do the same thing.
Circle of life, circle of life.
Circle of life. Yeah. So I am curious. So you had an extensive military career, which is pretty amazing. Thank you for your service, by the way. And
My pleasure.
and I'm curious, what were some of those major lessons that you learned about yourself as you were serving in the Air Force? Because every aspect of life, every kind of shift, transition that we have, we start to learn a little bit more about who we are. What were some of those lessons that you learned while you were serving?
Well, let me just go back. So my first military assignment, age 21, I walked in on day one and they were like, "Hey, congratulations, you have 56 people that you're responsible for." And it's like, what? And I think in the military, we become leaders by rank, right? But I would say the biggest thing I've always held fast to is people. People always being the most important thing, not the typical, yes, people are the most important asset that an organization has, but really valuing people. And I think I was valuing people before I met John, right? But really trying to understand and getting to know people and realizing the impact that made. Like, I remember I just kind of made it a goal of my own to get to know all of my people within the first 2 weeks. Like, remember their name, remember things about them. And I don't think it was until like my second assignment, third assignment, fourth assignment, you keep doing it. And then I remember one time somebody asked her, like, how do you remember all these things about us? And I'm very intentional about that. And I think that's important because I'm going to be spending the next 2 years with you. And my job is to serve you because you're doing all the heavy lifting. And so always having an attitude of gratitude toward the people that are on your team, and always showing that how much you appreciate them by getting to know them more than just the job they do, but the people that they are.
And I think that's huge because I don't think a lot of people actually spend that time getting to know the people around them, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think that's a kind of an interesting transition too into the idea of community, because community is really important to pretty much any human being. It's some of us have poor community, like it doesn't serve us, it doesn't encourage us, it doesn't really see our potential and push us in that direction. What has community played a part in your journey in life of kind of discovering who you are?
Well, community for me, again, since I was as far back I can remember, I've always had it. Whether it was the elderly people in the church, or
You be
your
careful what you're calling those
grandparents, or-
people now.
Yeah, but no, I mean,
Yeah.
I remember back in the day, and I know I'm aging myself, but back in the day, I remember times where if I cut up in church or did anything that was disrespectful. Not that I think I was intentionally disrespectful, but you know what I'm saying. I was doing something I should have been doing. Let's put it that way. Anytime I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing, sister so-and-so at the church she would fuss me out first. She didn't even have to ask my parents, right? She would fuss me out. And then it was going to be like, and I'm going to tell your parents. And then, she would tell my parents, and guess what? There are consequences that I had to experience because, so it's like getting in trouble twice. But that community of having them, and then, the wisdom that they pour into you as well. At the time, I think when we were all younger, you're just like, you guys are older, you don't get it. But as my mom says from time to time too, she always says, there's nothing new under the sun. And that is so true. I mean, even when I read the Bible, it's like all the things that are happening now, they were happening then. They were happening then. They might have different names, but they're happening then. And so for me, community it's so important because you need people to depend on, to pour into you, to share, and vice versa. And I think the biggest thing is we're created in community. I mean, you think about Adam, he wasn't just created and just like, okay, this is it. Where would the world be with one man who he would have to be millions of years old now, right?
Alone in the garden, taking care of the animals.
God created Eve, and they had kids, and as we know, the whole world has been multiplied many times over. But that community is important, and I think that's why it's so important to find your people. Find your tribe, as people call it these days.
Yeah.
People who are like-hearted, like-minded. And I think one of the biggest things too in your community, you need to have people that are not just only like-hearted and like-minded, but you also need to have people with different perspectives, people who are not yes people to you, people who can be honest with you, people who can be transparent and vulnerable with you, and give you this safe space to do the same.
Man, that is huge. Absolutely huge. Now, you've also done a ton of traveling in your life. You were bit by the travel bug from a young age. What have you kind of discovered about yourself through traveling around the world? I think it's so amazing. I've had the opportunity to also travel around here and there to mostly Latin American countries. But I will say one of the things that is mind-blowing to me is when I meet someone who hasn't traveled much, there's such a different world perspective. Like when I was a kid, I didn't know there was anything else besides Eugene, Oregon. That's where I grew up. And then as I got older in high school and then went to college, when I got to college, I knew that there was Portland, Oregon, and that was that was pretty much. I mean, I knew of this little place called Mexico. That was probably about it. But like my mind was never expanded to the idea of the entire world. From a young age, you've had the perception of a huge world to adventure, right? What has that done for you, and how has that played a part in who you are as a person today, getting to travel and getting to experience different cultures, different people?
Yeah. It's kept me open. So I have a very open mind about people. And I think too, when you're living in a different country, especially, you got to figure out the language. You got to learn it. So it's also kept me in a state of learning, right? So there's always something new, always something new to experience, to learn. I think, like I was telling you about living in Greece, 3 years of my life, but again, very impactful. So I learned the language. You had to learn the language in school. So learn that, but also just be open to the fact that people don't necessarily do the same things that people do in the U.S. And I actually find it more, I don't know, like rewarding sometimes to experience things. Like things I've learned over my travels are definitely like the values that people have overseas are different than here. Not to say people in the U.S. don't have some of those, but notably, I would say family is really huge overseas, like in Europe. Rest is really important. I miss siestas. I really do. Siesta is that time in the middle of the day where you just take a break. You can take a nap. You can go home and have lunch with your family or whatever, but it's just a time to kind of rest a little bit. And then you go on with your day. And I think as I continue to travel the world, I mean, it's just, you're learning something new. I think that's just the big thing I get excited about. I'm learning about a different culture, trying different foods, understanding the way they live. And again, it kind of goes back to my journey into minimalism is a lot of people overseas in different countries, they don't have a lot. Not to say they're like in poverty or something, but they just live with less, but have rich lives. And so that's one of my goals, like just to have a rich life with all the different experiences that I get from learning different things as I traveled around the world.
Well, that idea of rest and slowing down, spending time with family is so important. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people in the U.S. completely miss that. I mean, you guys listening right now, like think about the people that you know in your life who are constantly running to one thing. They're running to the next thing. If they have a family, if they've got kids, one of the biggest things I see, and I'm always talking with other people about, is they're constantly running from one sport to the next. There's one game over here. There's another game over here. And okay, now we're going to go over to this activity. Now we're going to go out to eat. And most people experience life nowadays, most kids, they don't actually experience time around the table, stopping, pausing. It's normally, and I'm guilty of this too sometimes, where I sit us down at the table. I'm like, come on, let's hurry up. Let's eat. Come on, let's go. We got to go, 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 go. And what's interesting is not only mentally do we shift and change a lot, but also physically, internally, there's such a need for us to slow down to not just enjoy the food that we're eating, but to actually chew the food that we're eating. There's a lot of studies around that too. I'm curious, what have you learned about yourself over the years as you've had those opportunities to slow down? Maybe being in a culture where it's not rush and go to the next thing, like a lot of European cultures, actually a lot of places pretty much outside of the U.S. It's, there's Hawaiian time. I know they're part of the U.S., but they're outside of the U.S. Come on, let's be real.
Island time.
Island time. There's Jamaica time. There's African time. Like there's European time. Like, and it comes to that idea of it's not always about rushing to the next thing, but it's also just it's about being present where you are.
Yeah.
What have you learned about that throughout your travels and throughout your life of just pausing?
So one of the lessons that I'm always catching when I'm doing that is it can wait. It can wait, meaning like when I compare life here in the U.S. First of all, let me back up a little bit. So I used to live in the D.C. area up until recently. Spent 16 years there.
That's a little go-go.
And that's a lot of years. I've never lived in a place that long. But anyway, I moved away because I felt like I was always on. There's something just about the vibe as you go up the corridor. It's like you're on, and you're going to be on until you leave there. So I chose to move to a place that was away from that, that had things that I find help me appreciate and slow down, which is water. Water is my favorite thing. Water is actually the inspiration for Uncaged Solutions, right? Because oceans are uncaged. But as I travel around, being present, like, is very important. Even like I love taking pictures, but the it can wait is like, you don't have to necessarily get that shot. Sometimes it matters most that you're just experiencing it while it's happening. Whether it's you're observing animals or, you're observing people. You don't have to, use your camera for everything all the time. I know we like to capture some memories, but I tell you, I was in Brazil about a couple of years almost ago, December 22. Spent about 2 weeks there. And I didn't take nearly as many pictures as I probably could have. just because I was just focused on being present, really experiencing that. And I mean, you think about it, you know, you can always tell a tourist because they got the camera out, right? But the people who live there, they're not doing that. And so it's just like, I like to live like a local sometimes, experience things so local. So taking the time to do that. And so for me, it also helps in my life as far as taking time to slow down and also realizing that it's just not that serious. When you really look at what matters, the things that we make matter or the things we put a lot of time and attention to, because we're like, if I don't get this done, I mean, that's how you end up with workaholics, you know, people who are just like, they never leave the office. But it's really not that serious. And I think that the thing is you have to really think about is what your values are, what your priorities are, and then those are the things that you really focus your time and attention on. And so then the things that are really serious are the things that I feel like as we get older, the things that matter most, like spending time with our family and the relationships that we have, that matters so much more than trying to work and get promotions and, you know, do all these other things that at the end of life, your job is not there. And as we know, like when you leave a job, they might say farewell, we'll miss you, but they really miss you. Like, you know, honestly, like you might keep in touch with one or two or maybe nobody from that job because you'll go get another one or you'll go do something different and they will hire somebody to replace you in like 2 weeks.
Are you trying to tell me that they're not mourning and weeping and wailing after I've left for weeks? Like not going into solitude of like, I don't know what to do with my life now that Nathan is gone. For my entire life, that's what I believe people were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's when you think about it, it's a very, that's how you create overwhelm in your life. And I was talking about that mini course I developed called Overwhelm to Overflow. The overwhelm that we have is from things that don't really matter. Like if you're on a job that's stressing you out, go find another job that, you know, won't. Or if you're in a job that you just really hate and your desire is to become an entrepreneur, then figure out how to make that transition, but go do what you really want. What's the point in being in a job for 30, 40 years and you're miserable?
How do you make that jump? Because you made a jump like that. You went into the entrepreneurial world, and for most people, that's absolutely terrifying. How did you make that jump?
Just quit. No, I was kidding. I did literally just quit. But for me, you know, I was uncomfortable with being comfortable. That's the best way I can explain it. I think sometimes, and entrepreneurship, by the way, is not for everybody. Totally not for everybody. You have to have a certain emotional intelligence to think about it. Because you're going to experience a lot of failures, a lot of discouragement, but you got to keep going. But I think for me, I could have stayed with the, you know, consistent paycheck and keep doing it over and over. But at the same time, my heart was yearning for something different. For me, it's more important to make impact. Like that's the legacy that I want to leave. I don't have natural children and things like that, but even if it's one life that I'm able to impact by what I share with them as far as leadership lessons or just wisdom from the things I've lived in my life, that matters more than anything else. And I think a lot of times, you know, I wish sometimes we could really take a hard look at jobs in general, like just work in the US sometimes, because it's so mechanated, right? Like it feels like people are machines or they're treated like machines versus human beings. And, you know, people get sick off of that too. That overwhelm of being in a place where you don't want to be causes stress. Stress manifests itself in your health. You know, I have seen people who, by all, you know, accounts, you would think, oh, they're a healthy person, nothing wrong. And because they're stressed out, they get ulcers. Because they're stressed out, they come up with cancer. You know, none of this is, you know, scientifically found, but definitely there's a relation, you know. But I think the thing is, you have to make a decision. And so for me, I made the decision. I hated my job. I really did. Like, I was becoming a person that when I looked in the mirror and got ready every day to go to work, that I didn't even like to look at in the mirror, because this was just not who I wanted to be. So I did make a jump, and I quit my job, and I said hello to me. That's what I did. And from there, the journey has been exciting. Yeah. Every day is an adventure. Don't know what's going to happen. So you just live and keep learning.
I love that so much. And there's so many golden pieces that you've brought up with that. And really this idea of minimalism plays a huge part in your life. I am curious, when did that come into your life? Like, when did you start to realize that you were too attached to things, to stuff? When did you start to shift? And do you remember when that was, when you started to realize, like, oh, I want to become more of a minimalist?
Yeah, when my dad died. February 17th, 2018. He passed in the hospital. I remember the next day, my best friend and I, at my mom's request, started clearing out his things. And I remember I packed up his shoes in one trash bag. Like, he had 12 pairs of shoes. And we started clearing out the other things. And long story short, we literally got rid of his belongings, not erasing who he is, right? But we got rid of the things that he used to wear, packed them, took them to the Goodwill, and back home in less than 2.5 hours. And my dad was always a very simple person anyway. He was always like, you only need 2 pairs of shoes, a black pair and a brown pair. You know, he was that kind of guy. He was never into debt, right? He just lived simply. He was always, you know, focused on what do you actually need, you know. Wants are cool, but like, as long as you have the things you need, you're good. And so for me, I looked at my house at the time, and I was, you know, I had looked at it before, did some purging like I told you earlier, but that really to me was the moment where I really took a harder look at what do I have and what do I want to leave behind. And I say that from the perspective of, you know, like I said, we packed it all up. 2.5 hours later, we're back at the house. I always look at my time. All of our time is finite on this earth, right? And sometimes when you have a lot of stuff sometimes and people have to clean it up or go through it after you're gone, it can create some feelings of resentment even sometimes, because people are like, oh my gosh, there's like all this stuff. And it's a lot of time that people spend trying to go through your stuff. They don't really know what's important. They don't know, you know, where things are even sometimes. And so for me, I've just, you know, embarked on living my life simply, or simpler, to the point where when my time comes, my siblings or whoever has to come in and, you know, pack it out. They can do it without having to feel like, oh shoot, she had this crazy office that was packed with things miles high, you know. So being more organized, you know, that was another thing. My dad, when he passed, I mean, he was doing this obviously for years before, but he had a list. I know like now there's a lot of systems out there you can use, but it was just he had typed it up on a piece of white paper, but he had like all the account numbers, all the, you know, investment things that he had. And it just made life simpler. Like when I settled his estate, I did it pretty quickly. because it was already there. And so that gives you like a peace of mind, right? It gives you, it doesn't create overwhelm. It doesn't create stress because, somebody made it easier for you. And so I always think of myself, and I encourage people, make it easier for the people that you leave behind. Don't just enjoy it. It's nice to enjoy what you have, but I think sometimes we can have so much like excess that we're not even really accessing because we are, you have so much. I mean, how many times have you gone through your closet and then you find that you're like, oh shoot, I forgot I had this shirt.
Oh,
right?
That doesn't fit. That definitely doesn't fit me anymore.
Right. It's like, why are we holding on to things that no longer serve us? Right. So
it's so
letting
good.
go of those things.
It's so good because so many of us have our hands wrapped around so many different things, dreams and thoughts that we wrap ourselves, almost our entire identity into the things that we hold, when in fact, the identity that we have, if we show up in our life and we care for people, we love people, we create community around those people, that is the thing that outlasts all of us, right? It's the memory that we leave with other people. And so many people, I think, get wrapped up into the rat race of, I gotta get more. I gotta experience, like even experiencing more. It's not even necessarily experiencing more. It's also slowing down to experience just what's around you, not looking to the next thing, but being present right now in life. I have absolutely loved our time so much, Cynthia, like this. It's been so enriching to learn more about you, more about your life, what you've gone through in your life. For all of you listening, make sure you go follow Cynthia on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. You can find her by searching Uncaged Solutions. You can also keep your eye open for her podcast that's coming out, Uncaged Solutions, which is coming out at the first of the year, sometime around there. So we're going to hold her accountable to that because it's going to be absolutely amazing. But I do want to ask you one more question here before we wrap up, Cynthia.
Sure.
You've talked a lot about minimalism. You've talked a lot about a number of different things, but minimalism has been the number one topic that has come out of our conversation. For the people that, let's just say they're hoarders, they're life hoarders, they're hoarding everything in their life. That, they want to fill up their office with things. They want to fill up their living room with different things. What do you say to that person to get them to start transitioning to the idea of minimalistic living? Not that you can't have things, but what would you tell that person that maybe is unsure of letting go of things because what if they miss out?
Yeah. So what are you afraid of? I think the thing is really asking yourself, why do you even have that? Like, why do you still have that? Ask yourself the reason why, and asking yourself, how does it serve you? I mean, asking a lot of questions, right? But, why do you still have that? How does it serve you? And then if you can't answer those questions, let it go. I think a lot of times you have to remember that things that we purchase or, whether it's a trinket from an experience or something like that, sometimes it's just for that moment and they're for seasons. But we continue to grow. It's just like any natural plant out in the nature, right? Like trees, they go through leaves and shedding of the leaves. We have to shed some of that in order for us to make room to grow in the future.
That is amazing. So good. Cynthia, thank you so much for being on the show. I know that so many people appreciate everything that you said. Make sure and go back, listen to all of these different aspects of life that she was talking about, especially the minimalistic piece. I hope that you guys walk away understanding that you don't need to necessarily have more to be more. You can be more just by experiencing the things that are around you. So until next time, make sure you share, like, and tag a friend in this. We would love for this to get out to more people so that it could enrich more lives. So until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.